The hospital clock showed 6:30 a.m. when Dr. Amelia Washington finally stepped out of the operating room. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and exhaustion weighed heavy on her shoulders. She had just finished her third surgery in 18 hours. A car accident had brought in multiple patients during the night, and as the head neurosurgeon, she couldn't leave until everyone was stable. Her phone buzzed with a text from her babysitter. "Kids are asking when mommy's coming home. Hope everything's okay at the hospital." Amelia smiled despite her tiredness. Her two children, 8-year-old Maya and 5-year-old Carlos, were probably getting ready for school right about now. She had missed dinner with them again, missed bedtime stories, missed helping Maya with her math homework. Being a single mother and a surgeon meant making sacrifices every day. She walked to her locker and changed out of her surgical scrubs into a fresh pair. The hospital was quieter now, with only the essential staff moving through the hallways. She grabbed her purse and car keys, but before leaving, she stopped at the small mirror inside her locker door. Around her neck hung a beautiful diamond necklace. It wasn't flashy or oversized, but the stones caught the light in a way that made them sparkle like tiny stars. The necklace had belonged to her grandmother, then her mother, and now it was hers. She wore it every day, tucked under her scrubs where most people couldn't see it. It reminded her of the strong women who came before her, women who worked hard and never gave up on their dreams. Her grandmother had been a seamstress who saved every penny to buy this necklace for herself. Back in the 1940s, it was unusual for a black woman to own something so elegant. But Grandma Rose always said, "Baby, you work hard for what you want, and you wear it with pride." Her mother had worn the same necklace when she graduated from nursing school, when she got married, and when Amelia was born. Now Amelia wore it during her toughest days at the hospital. It gave her strength when surgeries got complicated and hope when patients were fighting for their lives. The drive home took 30 minutes through the quiet suburban streets. Amelia had moved to Willowbrook Heights 3 years ago, when she got promoted to department head. The neighborhood was peaceful, with well-maintained houses and tree-lined streets. It was exactly the kind of place she wanted to raise her children. She pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at her house. It was a modest 2-story home with blue shutters and a small front garden that Maya helped her plant last spring. The mortgage was steep, but she could afford it now. All those years of medical school, residency, and working double shifts had finally paid off. As she got out of her car, Amelia noticed her neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, watering plants in her front yard. The older woman looked up and stared. This wasn't unusual. Mrs. Thompson often stared at Amelia and her children, though she never said hello or waved like the other neighbors did. Amelia had tried to be friendly when she first moved in. She brought cookies when they had a block party, waved good morning when she saw Mrs. Thompson checking her mail, and even offered to help carry groceries once when she saw the elderly woman struggling. But Mrs. Thompson always responded with cold politeness or ignored her completely. The other neighbors were different. The Johnson family next door often invited Maya and Carlos over to play with their kids. Mr. Peterson across the street helped her fix a broken fence gate last winter. Mrs. Chen from down the block brought soup when Amelia was working late shifts during flu season. But Mrs. Thompson remained distant and unwelcoming. Today, as Amelia walked toward her front door, she could feel Mrs. Thompson's eyes following her. The older woman seemed to be staring particularly hard at something. Amelia looked down at herself, wondering if there was a stain on her scrubs or if her hair looked especially messy. Then she realized what Mrs. Thompson was staring at. The diamond necklace was visible above the neckline of her scrubs, catching the morning sunlight. Amelia had forgotten to tuck it back inside after changing clothes at the hospital. She didn't think much of it and continued walking to her door. Inside the house, she could hear her children getting ready for school. Maya was practicing her piano scales while Carlos was probably making a mess trying to pour his own cereal. Their babysitter, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been with the family since Amelia started her new position. She was kind and patient, treating Maya and Carlos like her own grandchildren. "Mommy's home," Carlos shouted when he heard the front door open. He ran toward her in his superhero pajamas, still holding a piece of toast with jam. "Good morning, sweetheart," Amelia said, scooping him up for a hug. "Did you sleep well?" Maya appeared at the top of the stairs, already dressed for school in her favorite purple dress. "Mom, you look tired. Was it a hard night at the hospital?" Amelia was always amazed by how perceptive her daughter was. "A few. People got hurt in an accident, but they're going to be okay now. I'm sorry I missed dinner again." "It's okay, Mom. Mrs. Rodriguez made tacos and we saved you some in the fridge." Mrs. Rodriguez came from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Dr. Washington, you should eat something and get some rest. I can take the children to school this morning." "Thank you, but I want to take them. I've missed too much time with them this week." After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Amelia helped her children finish getting ready. She braided Maya's hair while Carlos tried to tie his shoes by himself. These quiet morning moments were precious to her, even when she was exhausted. Through the kitchen window, she noticed Mrs. Thompson standing in her yard again, this time talking on her phone while looking directly at Amelia's house. The woman seemed agitated, gesturing with her free hand and pacing back and forth. Amelia wondered if everything was all right, but she had learned not to worry too much about her unfriendly neighbor's behavior. "Mom, can you help me with my math homework tonight?" Maya asked while packing her backpack. "Of course, sweetheart. I promise I'll be home for dinner tonight." "You said that yesterday, too," Carlos pointed out innocently. Amelia knelt down to his level. "You're right, buddy. Sometimes emergencies happen at the hospital and I have to help sick people, but I always try my best to come home to you and Maya." As they prepared to leave for school, Amelia caught another glimpse of Mrs. Thompson through the window. The older woman was still on her phone, still staring at their house. There was something about her expression that seemed different today. More intense, more focused. But Amelia pushed the thought away. She had more important things to worry about than a nosy neighbor. Her children needed breakfast, and she needed to drop them off at school before catching a few hours of sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges at the hospital, new patients to help, and new reasons to wear her grandmother's necklace with pride. Little did she know that Mrs. Thompson's phone call would change everything in the next few hours. Mrs. Helen Thompson stood behind her lace curtains, gripping her phone tightly as she watched her neighbor's every move. At 63 years old, she had lived in Willowbrook Heights for over 30 years. She remembered when all the houses on Maple Street looked exactly like hers and all the families looked exactly like her family too. That morning, as she watered her prized rose bushes, she had gotten a clear look at that necklace around Dr. Washington's neck. The diamonds sparkled in the sunlight, each stone probably worth more than Helen's monthly Social Security check. Her mind began racing with questions and assumptions. How could someone like that afford jewelry like this? Helen had worked as a secretary for 40 years and never owned anything half as expensive. Her late husband had been an insurance salesman, and together they had barely managed to pay off their mortgage. Yet here was this woman, probably half her age, wearing diamonds like she was some kind of movie star. Helen had been suspicious of the Washington family since they moved in 3 years ago. It wasn't that she had anything personal against them, she told herself. It was just that the neighborhood had changed so much. Property values, crime rates, the whole character of the area was different now. She walked back inside her house and poured herself a cup of coffee, but her hands were shaking with nervous energy. Through her kitchen window, she could see right into the Washington family's breakfast room. The mother was helping her children get ready for school, acting like everything was normal. But that necklace kept bothering Helen. She had worked in insurance long enough to know expensive jewelry when she saw it. Those weren't fake diamonds or costume jewelry. They were the real thing, probably worth thousands of dollars, maybe tens of thousands. Where would a woman like that get money for something like that? Helen's imagination began filling in the blanks. Maybe she stole it from one of her wealthy patients at the hospital. Maybe she found it somewhere and decided to keep it. Maybe it was payment for something illegal. The more Helen thought about it, the more convinced she became that something wasn't right. She had watched enough crime shows on television to know that people didn't just walk around wearing stolen jewelry in broad daylight unless they thought they could get away with it. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found her friend Rita's number. Rita lived 2 streets over and always seemed to know everything that was happening in the neighborhood. "Rita, it's Helen. Have you noticed anything strange about that family on my street lately? Which family, dear? The Washington family. The ones with the 2 children. I just saw the mother wearing the most expensive-looking diamond necklace I've ever seen. I'm talking about serious money here, Rita. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Well, Helen, she is a doctor at the hospital. Doctors make good money, don't they? Not that good. I looked up surgeon salaries online last month. Even the highest-paid ones couldn't afford jewelry like what I just saw. Those diamonds were flawless, Rita, museum quality. Helen could hear Rita sighing. What are you suggesting, Helen? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying it's suspicious. She works at the hospital where all those wealthy patients go. Rich people leave jewelry and valuables in their rooms all the time. Hospital workers have access to everything. Helen, that's a very serious accusation. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just observing facts. Helen moved to her living room window where she had a better view of the Washington house. She's getting the children ready for school right now, acting like nothing's wrong. But I'm telling you, that necklace is worth more money than most people see in a lifetime. After hanging up with Rita, Helen felt even more unsettled. Rita hadn't agreed with her concerns, but that didn't mean Helen was wrong. Sometimes it took one person with courage to speak up about things that seemed off. She made herself another cup of coffee and sat in her recliner by the window. From here, she could monitor all the activity at the Washington house. She watched as Dr. Washington helped her daughter into a purple dress and assisted her son with his shoelaces. The whole scene looked so normal, so innocent. But Helen couldn't stop thinking about those diamonds. Her phone rang, interrupting her surveillance. It was her son David calling from California. Hi, Mom, just checking in. How are you doing? I'm fine, sweetheart. Just keeping an eye on the neighborhood. Mom, you're not causing trouble with the neighbors again, are you? Helen bristled at the question. David had gotten upset with her last year when she complained to the Homeowners Association about the noise levels during the Washington children's birthday party. He said she was being unreasonable, but Helen believed in maintaining community standards. I'm not causing trouble. I'm being a responsible neighbor. Someone needs to pay attention to what's going on around here. What's going on, Mom? Helen told David about the necklace, about her suspicions, about how expensive jewelry didn't belong in their middle-class neighborhood unless someone was up to no good. Mom, stop. Just stop right there. You're making assumptions about people based on nothing. This woman is a neurosurgeon. She saves people's lives for a living. Maybe the necklace was a gift or an inheritance, or maybe she just worked hard and bought it for herself. You didn't see it, David. This wasn't some little gift. This was serious money. Even if it was, it's none of your business. Please promise me you won't do anything stupid. After David hung up, Helen felt frustrated and misunderstood. Nobody seemed to take her concerns seriously. But she had lived in this neighborhood longer than anyone else. She had watched it change, watched new people move in, watched the whole character of the community shift. She returned to her window post and continued watching the Washington house. Dr. Washington was loading her children into her car now, probably taking them to school. The necklace was still visible, still sparkling, still bothering Helen more with each passing minute. What if this woman was a thief? What if she was stealing from patients and nobody was doing anything about it? What if Helen was the only person brave enough to report suspicious activity? She thought about all the crime shows she watched, all the stories about hospital workers who stole from patients. It happened more often than people realized. Someone needed to investigate before this woman got away with whatever she was doing. Helen walked to her kitchen and found the business card she kept on her refrigerator. It had the number for the local police department's non-emergency line. She had called them once before when teenagers were skateboarding too loudly in the park across the street. But this felt different. This felt more serious. She picked up her phone and dialed 911 instead. This was an emergency, wasn't it? If someone was walking around the neighborhood wearing stolen jewelry, that was a crime in progress. Juan, what's your emergency? Helen's heart was beating fast. I need to report suspicious activity in my neighborhood. There's a woman here wearing what appears to be very expensive stolen jewelry. Ma'am, what makes you believe the jewelry is stolen? She's a hospital worker, and the necklace she's wearing is worth more money than she could possibly afford on her salary. She has access to wealthy patients' belongings. Do you have any evidence that this jewelry was stolen from a specific victim? Well, no, but it's obvious something isn't right. This woman doesn't belong in a neighborhood like this wearing jewelry like that. The dispatcher asked for Helen's address and the address where the suspicious activity was taking place. Helen provided both, along with a detailed description of Dr. Washington and the diamond necklace. Officers will be dispatched to investigate, ma'am. Please stay in your home until they arrive. Helen hung up the phone, feeling both relieved and nervous. She had done the right thing, hadn't she? If Dr. Washington was innocent, then the police would sort it out quickly. But if Helen was right about the stolen jewelry, then she might have just prevented a serious crime from continuing. She returned to her window to wait for the police cars to arrive. Outside, the neighborhood looked peaceful and quiet. Children were walking to the school bus stop. Adults were leaving for work. Everything seemed normal, but Helen knew that sometimes the most dangerous criminals were the ones who looked completely ordinary. Dr. Amelia Washington had just returned from dropping her children at school when she noticed the police car pulling into her driveway. Her heart immediately jumped to worry about her patients. Had something happened at the hospital? Was there an emergency surgery waiting for her? She parked her car and walked toward the two officers who were getting out of their vehicle. Both men looked serious, with their hands resting near their duty belts. The older officer was tall and heavy-set, with gray hair and stern eyes. The younger one appeared to be in his 30s, with a nervous energy that made Amelia feel uneasy. "Ma'am, are you the resident of this address?" the older officer asked, pulling out a small notebook. "Yes, I'm Dr. Amelia Washington. Is there a problem? Did something happen at the hospital?" The younger officer stepped closer, his eyes immediately focusing on the diamond necklace around her neck. "We received a report about suspicious activity at this address, specifically regarding expensive jewelry that may have been obtained illegally." Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. She looked down at her grandmother's necklace, the same necklace she had worn every day for the past 5 years. "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" "Ma'am, we need you to explain how you came to possess that necklace," the older officer said, pointing directly at the diamonds. "A concerned neighbor reported that the jewelry appears to be worth more than your legitimate income could support." "A concerned neighbor?" Amelia repeated, glancing around the quiet street. She noticed Mrs. Thompson standing in her front window, watching the scene unfold. "Officer, this necklace belonged to my grandmother. It's been in my family for over 70 years. The younger officer pulled out his phone and took a photo of the necklace without asking permission. "Do you have any documentation proving ownership? Receipt of purchase? Insurance papers? Appraisal records? Documentation for my grandmother's jewelry?" Amelia felt a surge of indignation. "Officer, with all due respect, this is a family heirloom. My grandmother bought this necklace in 1952. She didn't exactly keep receipts for 70 years. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to remove the necklace and hand it over while we investigate," the older officer said, reaching for his handcuffs. "You can retrieve it from the station once you provide proof of legitimate ownership." "Absolutely not." Amelia stepped back toward her front door. "This is my property. I haven't committed any crime. You have no warrant, no evidence, and no right to take my personal belongings." The situation escalated quickly. The younger officer moved to block her path to the house while the older one spoke into his radio, requesting backup. Amelia couldn't believe what was happening. In her own driveway in broad daylight, she was being treated like a criminal. "Ma'am, you need to cooperate with our investigation," the older officer said. "The neighbor who called this in provided very specific details about the value of that necklace. She believes it may have been stolen from wealthy patients at the hospital where you work." "She believes?" Amelia's voice rose with frustration. "Based on what evidence? Based on what facts? You're harassing me because someone thinks I can't afford my own jewelry? We need to verify your employment and income," the younger officer said, "and we need to examine the necklace more closely to determine if it matches any reported stolen property." By now, other neighbors had begun to notice the commotion. Amelia could see curtains moving in several windows, people stepping out onto their porches, children stopping their bikes to stare. Her face burned with embarrassment and anger. "I am a neurosurgeon at Metropolitan Hospital," she said slowly and clearly. "I am the head of the neurosurgery department. I have worked there for 8 years. I save people's lives for a living. This necklace has been in my family since before I was born. Ma'am, we understand you're upset, but we need to follow procedure," the older officer said. "Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. You're arresting me. For what crime exactly?" suspicion of theft and failure to cooperate with a police investigation. The handcuffs clicked around Amelia's wrists just as Maya's school bus rounded the corner. Through the window, she could see her daughter's horrified face as the bus slowed down to navigate around the police cars. Maya pressed her small hands against the glass, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please," Amelia begged. "My children don't need to see this. Can we handle this quietly?" But it was too late. 2 more police cars had arrived, along with a small crowd of neighbors. Mrs. Thompson had come outside now, standing on her porch with her arms crossed, nodding approvingly at the officers. Amelia was placed in the back of the first police car while officers searched her purse and examined her identification. The younger officer took multiple photos of the necklace from different angles while speaking to someone on his phone about running the jewelry through a database of stolen property. "This is insane," Amelia said to anyone who would listen. "I'm being arrested for wearing my own necklace in my own driveway." Mr. Johnson from next door approached one of the officers. "Excuse me, but I think there's been a mistake. Dr. Washington is a wonderful neighbor and a respected member of our community. She's never caused any trouble. Sir, please step back and let us handle this investigation," the officer replied without looking up from his paperwork. Mrs. Chen from down the street had also come outside. She walked directly to the police car where Amelia was sitting and tapped on the window. "Dr. Washington, what can I do to help?" "Should I call someone?" Through the glass, Amelia mouthed the words, "Call the hospital," and ask for Dr. Patricia Chen. She hoped her colleague would be able to verify her identity and clear up this ridiculous situation. The older officer was now speaking with Mrs. Thompson, who was providing a detailed account of her suspicions. Amelia could see the woman gesturing wildly, pointing at the police car, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. "She's been acting suspicious for weeks," Mrs. Thompson was saying loud enough for everyone to hear. "Always coming home at odd hours, always wearing different expensive clothes. I've been watching her and something just didn't seem right." "Ma'am, you mentioned she works at the hospital," the officer said. "Do you have any evidence that she's been stealing from patients there?" "Well, no direct evidence, but where else would someone like her get jewelry like that? Hospital workers have access to everything. They go through patient belongings all the time." A young police officer who had just arrived on the scene looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. He was reviewing Amelia's driver's license and the registration from her car. "Sergeant, this woman's address matches this location. She's lived here for 3 years according to the motor vehicle records. Her car is registered and insured. Everything appears to be legitimate." "That doesn't prove the necklace isn't stolen," the older officer replied. "We still need to verify her employment and income level." Amelia sat in the back of the police car watching her neighbors whisper and point. Some looked sympathetic, while others seemed to believe she must have done something wrong. After all, why would the police arrest someone who was completely innocent? Her mind raced with the implications of what was happening. Would this affect her medical license? Would the hospital administration hear about it? Would her children's friends' parents stop letting them play together? She thought about her grandmother, who had saved every penny to buy this necklace during a time when Black women had few opportunities to own anything beautiful or valuable. She thought about her mother, who had worn it with pride through decades of discrimination and hardship. Now she was being arrested for wearing it in a neighborhood where she had every right to live. The diamond necklace that had once symbolized her family's strength and perseverance was now being used as evidence against her. The same jewelry that had given her comfort during difficult surgeries was now the reason she was sitting in handcuffs, humiliated in front of her entire community. As she waited for someone to come to her rescue, Amelia realized that all her education, all her professional achievements, all her contributions to society meant nothing to the people who had already decided she didn't belong. The question was no longer whether she could prove her innocence. The question was whether anyone would believe her when she tried. Officer Kevin Martinez was only 2 years out of the police academy, but something about the situation felt wrong to him. He had been called as backup to what was supposed to be a routine theft investigation, but the more he observed, the less sense it made. The woman in the back of the police car didn't look like any criminal he had ever encountered. Her scrubs were clean and professional, her demeanor was calm despite obvious distress, and her identification showed a clean driving record with an address that matched the house they were standing in front of. While his senior officers continued questioning Mrs. Thompson, Kevin decided to do some investigating of his own. He pulled out his smartphone and quietly searched for Dr. Amelia Washington Metropolitan Hospital. What he found made his stomach drop. The first result was a news article from just 3 days ago. Local neurosurgeon saves 3 lives in complex emergency surgery. The photo showed Dr. Washington in surgical scrubs, holding an award from the hospital administration. The article described her as one of the region's most skilled neurosurgeons and mentioned her recent promotion to department head. Kevin scrolled through more results. Dr. Washington had published research in medical journals, spoken at conferences, and received multiple awards for her work. There were photos of her at medical charity events, quotes from colleagues praising her expertise, and testimonials from grateful patients' families. This was not a thief or a criminal. This was a respected professional who saved lives for a living. Sergeant Collins, Kevin called to his supervisor. I think we need to reconsider this situation. Sergeant Collins was still taking notes from Mrs. Thompson's statement. What is it, Martinez? Sir, I've verified Dr. Washington's employment at Metropolitan Hospital. She's not just any hospital worker, she's the head of neurosurgery. This article says she makes over $300,000 a year. Mrs. Thompson overheard and shook her head vigorously. That can't be right. Nobody makes that kind of money around here. Ma'am, neurosurgeons are among the highest paid medical professionals, Kevin explained gently. Dr. Washington could easily afford expensive jewelry on her legitimate salary. Just then, a silver BMW pulled up to the scene. A well-dressed Asian woman in her 40s stepped out, looking concerned and slightly out of breath. She approached the officers with the confidence of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. Excuse me, I'm Dr. Patricia Chen, Chief of Staff at Metropolitan Hospital. I received a call that one of my colleagues was in some kind of trouble here. Sergeant Collins looked up from his notepad. Are you here about Dr. Washington? Yes, absolutely. Amelia Washington is one of our most valued surgeons. She just completed an 18-hour shift saving multiple trauma victims. What exactly is the problem here? We received reports that she may be in possession of stolen jewelry. Dr. Chen looked genuinely confused. Stolen jewelry? Are you talking about her grandmother's necklace? She wears that every day. It's been in her family for generations. Mrs. Thompson stepped forward aggressively. How would you know about her family jewelry? That's very convenient. Dr. Chen turned to face Mrs. Thompson with the kind of steady gaze she typically reserved for difficult board meetings. I know because Dr. Washington and I have been colleagues for 8 years. I know because she's told me the story of that necklace many times. Her grandmother was a seamstress who saved for 2 years to buy it. Her mother wore it when she graduated nursing school. Amelia wears it during difficult surgeries because it reminds her of the strong women in her family. Kevin felt increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. Dr. Chen, can you verify Dr. Washington's employment and income? Of course. Dr. Chen pulled out her phone and made a quick call. Within minutes, she was forwarding official employment verification documents to Kevin's email. Dr. Washington's annual salary is $320,000, plus bonuses for emergency surgeries and department leadership. She could afford to buy 10 necklaces like that one if she wanted to. A hospital security guard arrived in another vehicle, followed by what appeared to be a hospital administrator carrying a briefcase. The administrator, a middle-aged black man in an expensive suit, introduced himself as Harold Foster, Vice President of Medical Affairs. Officers, I need to understand why one of our top surgeons is sitting in a police car. Dr. Washington was supposed to be sleeping right now, so she could return for another emergency surgery this afternoon. The crowd of onlookers had grown significantly. Other neighbors were arriving home from work, school buses were dropping off children, and everyone seemed to be talking at once. Kevin noticed several people holding up their phones recording the scene. Mr. Foster approached Mrs. Thompson directly. Ma'am, I understand you're the person who called this in. Can you explain to me what evidence you had that Dr. Washington committed any crime? Mrs. Thompson suddenly looked less confident than she had earlier. Well, I just thought it was suspicious that she was wearing such expensive jewelry. It didn't seem like something she could afford. Based on what knowledge of her financial situation? Well, I just assumed. You assumed? Mr. Foster's voice carried the authority of someone who dealt with hospital board members and insurance executives on a daily basis. You called the police on a neurosurgeon because you assumed she couldn't afford her own family jewelry. Dr. Chen was now taking photos of the scene with her phone. "This is going to be a serious problem for your department," she told Sergeant Collins. "Dr. Washington has colleagues throughout the medical community. When word gets out that she was arrested for wearing her grandmother's necklace," Kevin's phone buzzed with a text message from the police database. He had run the necklace description through the stolen property system, and the results had just come back. No matches found. No similar jewelry had been reported stolen from any hospital, home, or business in the entire state. "Sergeant," Kevin said quietly, "the stolen property database came back negative. There's no record of any similar jewelry being reported missing." At the same time, another officer was receiving a call from the police station. "Sergeant Collins, dispatch wants to know if you need any additional units. They're getting calls from local media asking about the arrest of a prominent surgeon." The situation was spiraling beyond what anyone had anticipated. What started as a simple neighbor complaint was turning into a potential public relations disaster for the police department. Mrs. Thompson was now standing alone on her porch, no longer the center of attention. Most of the neighbors who had gathered were clearly supporting Dr. Washington, talking quietly among themselves about how wrong this whole situation was. Kevin walked over to the police car where Dr. Washington was still sitting in handcuffs. Through the window, he could see that she was crying quietly. "Not from fear, but from the sheer humiliation of the experience, Dr. Washington," he said softly. "I want you to know that some of us realize a mistake has been made here. This is going to be resolved very quickly." She looked up at him with tired, sad eyes. "Officer, I've lived in this neighborhood for 3 years. I've never caused any trouble. I pay my taxes, I help my neighbors, I save lives at the hospital. All I did this morning was wear my grandmother's necklace while dropping my children off at school." Kevin felt ashamed of his profession in that moment. This woman had dedicated her life to helping others, and now she was being treated like a criminal because a neighbor made racist assumptions about her financial situation. He walked back to Sergeant Collins, who was still trying to figure out how to handle the growing crowd and media attention. "Sir, I think we need to release Dr. Washington immediately and issue an apology. We have no evidence of any crime, multiple witnesses to her good character, and verification of her ability to afford the jewelry in question." Dr. Chen overhead and nodded approvingly. That would be the right thing to do. But the damage has already been done. Dr. Washington's reputation and emotional well-being have been harmed by this incident. As Kevin reached for the keys to remove Dr. Washington's handcuffs, he couldn't help but think about how different this day could have been if Mrs. Thompson had simply minded her own business, or if the responding officers had asked more questions before making assumptions. The truth was finally emerging, but for Dr. Washington, the humiliation was far from over. The handcuffs came off Dr. Washington's wrists at exactly 2:47 p.m., but by then it was too late to contain the story. 3 different neighbors had recorded parts of the incident on their phones, and one video was already spreading rapidly across social media platforms. The caption read, "Respected neurosurgeon arrested in her own driveway for wearing her grandmother's necklace. This is what racial profiling looks like in 2025. Officer Martinez helped Dr. Washington out of the police car, offering her a bottle of water and a quiet apology. Dr. Washington, I want you to know that not all of us agreed with how this situation was handled." She accepted the water gratefully, her hands still shaking slightly from the stress of the past hour. "Thank you, Officer Martinez. I appreciate you taking the time to verify the facts." Sergeant Collins approached with obvious reluctance. "Dr. Washington, on behalf of the department, I apologize for any inconvenience this incident may have caused. You're free to go, and there will be no charges filed." "Inconvenience?" Dr. Chen stepped forward, her voice sharp with indignation. "Sergeant, this woman was handcuffed and detained based on nothing more than a neighbor's racist assumptions. This isn't an inconvenience, it's a violation of her civil rights." The crowd of neighbors and onlookers had grown to nearly 30 people. Most were supportive of Dr. Washington, with several offering statements about her character and contributions to the community. But the damage to her sense of security and belonging was already done. Mrs. Thompson had retreated inside her house, but her living room curtains were still moving as she watched the aftermath of her phone call. She had expected the police to quietly investigate and perhaps warn the Washington family about suspicious behavior. She never imagined it would turn into such a public spectacle. Harold Foster, the hospital administrator, was already on his phone with the hospital's legal department. We need to issue a statement supporting Dr. Washington and distancing ourselves from any suggestion that our staff are involved in criminal activity, he was saying. By 4 p.m., the local news stations had picked up the story. Channel 7's afternoon broadcast led with prominent surgeon, arrested for wearing family jewelry, while Channel 12 went with racial profiling suspected in suburban police incident. The story reached social media platforms with explosive speed. The hashtag #Justice for Dr. Washington was trending within hours, with thousands of people sharing their own experiences with racial profiling and false accusations. Medical professionals from across the country posted messages of support, many sharing photos of themselves wearing family jewelry with captions like, "Not a crime to wear my grandmother's pearls," and "My father's watch, inherited, not stolen." Mrs. Thompson first realized the magnitude of what she had set in motion when her phone started ringing nonstop around 5 p.m. The calls weren't from friends or family. They were from reporters, bloggers, and angry strangers who had somehow found her phone number online. The first news van arrived at 6:30 p.m., followed by 3 more within the hour. Reporters knocked on her door, called out questions from her front yard, and broadcast live reports standing directly in front of her house. Her name, age, and employment history were suddenly public information being discussed on television and social media. Helen Thompson, 63, worked as a secretary for Hartwell Insurance until her retirement last year, one reporter announced. Neighbors describe her as a reclusive woman who frequently complained about noise and community activities. By evening, Mrs. Thompson had lost her part-time job at the local library. The head librarian called to inform her that her services would no longer be needed, citing concerns about judgment and community relations. The decision was made after dozens of people called the library, demanding that Helen be fired for her role in the incident. Meanwhile, Dr. Washington was at home, trying to explain to her children why police officers had put handcuffs on their mother. 8-year-old Maya was particularly upset, having seen the arrest from her school bus window. "Mommy, did you do something wrong?" Carlos asked, his 5-year-old mind struggling to understand why police would arrest someone he knew to be good and kind. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes people make mistakes about other people. The police officers thought I had done something wrong, but they learned they were mistaken. Was it because of our skin color?" Maya asked quietly. At 8 years old, she was already aware that the world sometimes treated people differently based on how they looked. Amelia sat down on the couch and pulled both children close to her. "Sometimes, baby girl, people make assumptions about others without knowing the facts. It's not right and it's not fair, but it happens." The doorbell rang continuously throughout the evening. Neighbors stopped by to offer support, bringing flowers, food, and apologies for what had happened. Mrs. Chen from down the street organized a neighborhood meeting to discuss how they could prevent similar incidents in the future. Mr. Johnson from next door was particularly apologetic. "Dr. Washington, I should have spoken up sooner. I should have told those officers immediately that you're a respected member of this community. Please don't blame yourself," Amelia replied. "None of us expected something like this to happen." The police department held an emergency meeting that evening to discuss their response to the growing public controversy. The police chief announced that there would be an internal investigation into the incident and that additional training on bias and proper investigation procedures would be implemented for all officers. Officer Martinez voluntarily attended the meeting to explain his perspective on what had gone wrong. "With respect, sir, we arrested a neurosurgeon for wearing her grandmother's necklace because a neighbor thought she looked suspicious. We need to examine how we respond to calls that may be based on racial bias rather than actual criminal activity." By the weekend, the story had gained national attention. Dr. Washington received interview requests from major news networks, invitations to speak at conferences about racial profiling, and messages of support from medical professionals around the world. The hospital where she worked issued a strong statement of support. Dr. Amelia Washington represents the highest standards of medical excellence and personal integrity. We are proud to have her on our team and condemn any suggestion that she is engaged in improper conduct. Mrs. Thompson, meanwhile, had become a social pariah. Her neighbors avoided her, her few friends stopped returning her calls, and she found herself the subject of harsh criticism on social media platforms she didn't even know existed. 3 weeks after the incident, Mrs. Thompson finally worked up the courage to write a letter of apology. She walked to Dr. Washington's house on a quiet Tuesday morning and left the handwritten note in the mailbox. "Dear Dr. Washington," the letter began, "I want to apologize for the terrible mistake I made. I realize now that my assumptions were wrong and hurtful. I let fear and prejudice cloud my judgment, and I'm sorry for the pain I caused you and your family." Dr. Washington found the letter that evening when she returned from the hospital. She read it twice, then sat in her kitchen holding the paper, thinking about forgiveness and community and the long road toward understanding. She never responded to the letter, but she didn't throw it away either. Sometimes the first step toward healing is simply acknowledging that harm was done. The diamond necklace still hung around her neck, sparkling in the kitchen light, carrying the same strength and history it always had. But now it carried something else too. The weight of a community's awakening to the reality of racial bias and the power of standing up for what's right. Mrs. Thompson's phone call had lasted less than 5 minutes, but its consequences would reshape how an entire community thought about assumptions, prejudice, and the courage required to treat all neighbors with dignity and respect. The incident became a case study in police training programs, a cautionary tale about the dangers of racial profiling, and a reminder that sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal who people really are when tested. For Dr. Washington, it was a painful lesson in how quickly a normal day could turn into a nightmare, but also a powerful demonstration of how many people were willing to stand up for justice when it mattered most.